Privet, assalamu alaikum, ciao, konnichiwa, Allah, hola, bonjour, good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you today? It's Ken at 10 once more. Just a quick comment. It was International Women's Day this week, and I just saw a post from a good, well-liked professional colleague about women and in the industry and some belittling comments from men. I just think, as a man in the industry, we should also be standing up for women and saying, you know what? I find that women can be the best estate agents in the business just like men. There is no difference. So the idea that we're somehow superior because we're men is so last century, and I can't believe that it's still being purveyed by so many men. In this office, I am outnumbered by about four to one in terms of women to men. And that's not because women are better or worse. They're the same and should be considered on their merits, the same as anyone else. But the idea that you even begin to select on whether someone's a woman or a man in an industry that requires such finesse and skill is just beyond me. It really is. Women are brilliant. So are men. It depends which men and which women we're talking about. Let's get that out there. So how are you? This is Ken at 10. That's a rant over for the day. Talking today about property as always. Welcome if you haven't been here before. We are James Alexander Estate Agents. We broadcast daily from our offices in Southwest London. We're in Norbury, Southwest 16, which is between Streatham and Croydon. And we're at the coalface, sitting in the office, talking to people every day about buying and selling and trying to help them make decisions on whether they should buy, sell, invest, become a buy-to-let investor. And buy-to-let investing isn't for everybody, by the way. It does depend on your personality and how much of a hands-on approach you want, how much you can do. The managing agents are there to take up that slack for you as well, but you need a trusted one. That's the most important thing. A few things. A lot of people have been asking me about the marketplace and saying, is there a negative side to what's going on in the world in terms of property prices? Now, I know it's ruthless to talk about things like money when people are dying out there, and it is absolutely shocking and awful. Well, history tells us that so far, it doesn't tend to impact on the UK market when there are wars. If you look at Iraq, where there was a direct threat to the UK, didn't have an impact on property prices. And nearly always, when I look back at what I've done in the past and when I've looked at the market and people have said, oh, it's near the top of the market, if you look back now, you'd say, God, I wish I'd have bought then. And I think we're in one of those periods now where some people are saying it's at the top. Some people are saying that there's so many challenges that the market faces that it could well fall. And the truth is, nobody really knows. But what we can do, and our best option, is to look at history and see what that teaches us. And from what I can see, we've still got a product that people want. There's an undersupply of, and therefore prices will continue to be pressed. There will come a point, of course, when affordability overtakes that. But remember also, as well as prices going up and that pressuring incomes, prices going up and inflation also erodes the value of debt. If you've got 10% inflation and £100 in the bank at the end of the year, you've got £90. And if you've got £100 worth of debt and inflation goes up by 10%, then at the end of the day, at the end of that year, your debt is now £90, not £100. And so if you multiply that up by mortgage terms, you can see why that erodes the value of debt and can be a positive thing for prices in terms of the housing market. A few headlines today for you. One straight away from Metro, the best cities to flip a house revealed. If you're not familiar with the term flip, this is where you buy a house and immediately turn it on to another buyer. And this is done by dealers and developers. Sometimes they pick up houses as cheap as they can, do a very cheap and speculative refurb, perhaps put it back in the auction. We've got one client who does between 50 and 60 a month in the auctions by picking them up as cheaply as they can for cash and then putting them back into the auction, sometimes after doing some minor repairs and improvements, sometimes just taking a chance that the market might have turned by then. But because of the volume they do, they only have to make a very small profit per unit to make that work, and they're very successful at it. So it just goes to show that that's one way of flipping. The other way is just literally to pick something up, wait for the price to rise, and then flip it over. According to a new report, 7 of the top 10 places to flip are the Manchester area. That ranks well across every category. And then we've got areas such as Nottingham and Portsmouth. London was not featuring in that list, and that's not surprising because we do have some of the lowest property price rises throughout the pandemic, mainly because people weren't going into the city. That's changed tremendously now. So I do expect that will start to turn around. We've already seen the Rightmove searches are up there. It used to be that the South Coast was the most popular search in the UK, and right now it's coming back to London. People are searching on Rightmove for London again, I'm delighted to report. So it'll be interesting to see what's happened. In terms of property price rises over the last year, the home track data is now out, and that says that the area that has had the biggest price rises is actually Wales, and the area with the smallest price rises is London. And London, by the way, comes in at about 3%. So still, when you're talking about the multiples of the amount of money we're talking about huge amounts of money. Bearing in mind, every property in London is averaging sort of £500,000 or thereabouts on average. Remortgaging could cost you £800 a year, according to the Daily Express now. Analysis by a mortgage advisor, L&C, based on the calculations, a number of assumptions, 40% equity in the home, looking for a 2-year fix, and £150,000 loan over 25 years could cost you £800 a year more. And it's likely to get worse if interest rates go up again. But the big question is, will they go up again? Because now, with everything else going on, it might well be that the government and the Bank of England just decide to take a step back and let people breathe a little, especially with the huge rises in the cost of fuel and everything else going on at the moment, which no doubt will then, pardon the pun, pump through to prices of both food and beverages. And so we expect that there will be some challenges ahead, no doubt. The energy efficiency now on the Telegraph, and they're reporting about the benefits of the heat pump grant scheme. And if you haven't listened to it yet, you really should go onto our podcast, the Property Buyer and Sellers podcast, and look for the episode with Bob Harris on energy saving. And there's a lot more information about heat pumps on there. He's a man that's used them for many years. But the government's Advisory Climate Change Committee has warned that the scheme will pay out £450 million in grants to homeowners to install low-carbon heat pumps and biomass boilers, which may fail to boost total installations, saying that the extent to which these installations will boost sales rather than fund people who would have bought them anyway is unclear. The committee said the strategy was not yet comprehensive and failed to account for 18% of the necessary emissions reduction by 2035. There's all sorts of problems with heat pumps. I don't think personally that we're ready yet, but certainly that's what came across in the podcast with the lovely Bob Harris. Apart from that, Vistry's bought loads of new plots. That's one of the biggest house builders in Britain. They're listed in the FTSE 250. And they built enough land last year on which you can build 7,667 homes. That's its biggest investment in land since 2009. And it made an excellent start to the year with sales rates up 20%. So it's interesting that the developers are out there with a lot of confidence and really gobbling up a lot of land. The Mirror reports on the thousands of bank branches that have been left vacant across the UK. 2,343 bank premises are now vacant. We're doing all that online banking, and the banks are closing at a rate of knots, aren't they? I mean, whenever we look around, there seems to be an ex-bank doing nothing. It's interesting, but of all the empty banks, 57% have been for less than 3 years, but 352 branches, that's 15%, have been unlet for more than 5 years. 30 branches are abandoned at least 10 years after they first closed. I mean, it's a tragedy, isn't it? Here we are with a housing crisis. We've got these massive premises right smack bang in the middle of towns, and they're not being used for anything. Absolutely, we should be repurposing them and making them maybe community spaces on the ground floor, followed by flats above, with the flats above actually funding the space below. I think that would be a really smart idea. So imagine then you've got these big bank premises, convert upstairs into maybe 5 to 10 leasehold flats that could then be rented out by one of the big companies that's doing this at the moment, one of the big buy-to-let investors. And then the income from that, if it was done by a charity, could then be used to fund a community space on the ground floor for places to get together. And I think that's what's missing in most cities now, is those community hubs, those spaces. Certainly we could do one here in Norbury where people can get together and really start to pool their resources and help each other, because I think we're going to need it this year more than ever. But in terms of the market this year and what's going to happen to prices, well, look, what's going on in Ukraine right now is shocking and awful. And, there's no other way of putting it. I mean, it's just shocking, isn't it? But having said that, in terms of what it will mean for the marketplace, I just put a little quote up there I found that I thought was rather apt for the moment. But in terms of the market and the effect it's having, it's minimal, if at all, right now. What we're finding is that there's a lot of confidence. Sorry about that. Forgot to turn the bell off in the back office here. And we're finding that it's having a nil effect on property prices at the moment. And bearing in mind what happened with the Iraq war, we suspect that that will continue to be the case, but time will tell. Nobody really knows about these things. You can only take your best guess based on history. And history tells me that the market will not be impacted massively by the Russian invasion, and it will end at some point. The sooner the better. And when it does, we'll see the markets gain even more confidence, in my view, because I think we've still got an overspill, especially here in London, with the people that didn't buy or couldn't buy because their offices weren't open and didn't need to be in the city. And now we're seeing a massive bounce back in demand for rental properties, and sales properties are starting to pop back up as well. But there's not enough supply, which is driving prices even further. So that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Tomorrow we'll be back with another edition. Until then, stay safe, look after your family and friends, and we'll see you soon. Ciao.